Curia has been Charleston's fire chief since July of 2018. He tells me what he and the fire department are working on as Charleston grows for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Charleston Fire Chief Dan Curia, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it greatly. I know the last time I saw you, we had to rearrange this particular interview because of the weather, and I know you had some issues as well. But now we're here, and I know obviously you have been the Charleston Fire Chief since July of 2018. So, Chief, tell me this: what is your snapshot of the Charleston Fire Department right now?
Right now, I think it's an organization on the rise. It is a premier fire department in the country, and we're populated with good people doing good things for all the right reasons.
All the right reasons. So with all those great people that you have right now, Chief, how are you building a shared vision from all ranks of the fire department?
Well, I think it starts at the top, and when the leadership team is on board with what the priorities are, what the mission is, what the vision is, how we just want to do business from day to day. When we can all agree on that, then it's easier to go out and talk to the team about it and make sure that everybody is on board. But really at a grassroots level, it's FaceTime. It's FaceTime with our people, making sure that we are, as leaders, getting up, getting out of our offices, and making sure we're sitting down with our firefighters at all ranks, making sure that they know why we do what we do.
And Chief, what is that business that you all want to do with the shared vision that you have now?
Well, the vision for the fire department is to create a safer Charleston. And I think the interesting thing about that vision is that it doesn't mention the word fire in there at all. Now, I think it's a given that people know that the fire department focuses a lot on the prevention of fires, the extinguishment of fires. We also handle medical calls. We have a whole host of other things that we do, hazardous materials response, marine response, all kinds of things. But really, when you get down to just the core vision of the department, it is that the city of Charleston should be a little safer today than it was yesterday because of our efforts. And the city should be a little safer tomorrow than it is today because of our efforts, no matter what that entails.
So, Chief, let me ask you this. From July of 2018 to right now, how have you made Charleston safer under your leadership?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we have done is we have gone from a vacancy rate of 22%. When I got here, the fire department, as it stands today, is a little over 400 personnel. Now, in July of 2018, we were a little bit under 400 personnel, and we had 79 vacancies for firefighters. That equated to a 22% vacancy rate. So just trying to keep fire apparatus staffed so that we could go to emergencies was an incredibly challenging task. Then you add on to that what's happened in the last 5 years with a pandemic and the result of the pandemic with budget downturns and supply chain issues, all that. But really, in the last couple of years, and this is not me, this is the team.
Right.
We have managed to change our recruiting strategies. We were able to bring the fire department up to full staffing. We achieved that in 2023. Now, we've dipped below full staffing, but we only have 14 vacancies for firefighters right now. When you compare 14 vacancies now to 79 vacancies 5 years ago, I think you see that the department is on the right path.
And Chief, when you talk about that fire apparatus, what more do you need right now to keep up with the growth here in Charleston?
Well, luckily, the fire department does a pretty good job of long-range planning and trying to match the climate that we see, the built climate that we see, to the resources that we need. So we have constant conversations about where do we need fire protection, where do we need more fire protection. I think the most obvious places that we could point out are Cainhoy and John Island. So we're having those conversations. But then if you step away from the fire stations that you see around the city, and you say, what about the bigger picture of how do we protect the residents and the visitors to the city of Charleston? We have lots of needs in the special operations area. The marine environment is incredibly complex. It's incredibly challenging, requires a lot of training, requires a lot of resources, and that's something that we have to focus on daily.
And when you talk about those resources, how much money do you need to help out with that, Chief?
You know, I don't have dollar amount to put on it right now. I think one of the things that we are doing, we're partnered with the North Charleston Fire Department, the Mount Pleasant Fire Department, the U.S. Coast Guard, but there is a port vulnerability study that's being completed right now that's going to point out what is going well with protection in the port, what is providing challenges for protection in the port, and in the recommendation section, it's going to really focus in on what can the area fire departments do to best protect that critical element of Charleston, and then we'll be able to put dollars to the recommendations.
And so far, Chief, how many recommendations have you and your team added to this particular study?
Well, we just had a meeting about it, and really it's experts in the maritime environment looking at the entire spectrum of response and saying to bring up to industry standards, here's what you need to do. And obviously they're focusing on training components and equipment components and staffing components. But I can't really get more specific than that right now,
Right.
because the final report's not out.
Right, that's right. How much equipment do you have to keep up with this particular situation here?
So if we're talking about the maritime situation, we have 2 fireboats in the city of Charleston, and the larger fireboat has been out getting repairs for the last several months. But it's back in Charleston, and we're going through the process of making sure that all the repairs are to our specifications. Then we will make sure that our personnel are properly trained on the vessel again, since it has been gone for a little while. And as we transition that vessel back into service, the second boat that we've got is a little bit smaller, and it is being hauled out as we speak to undergo some maintenance also.
And how much is that costing your fire department, Chief?
The larger vessel underwent repairs that, and don't hold me quite to this dollar amount, but I want to say it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $180,000 to do the work.
Sure.
For the smaller boat that just actually got pulled out of the water this week, we will go through it. We will figure out what needs to be repaired. It's been in the city of Charleston now for probably 3 years. So we're going to make a list of things that just over time happen to a vessel, and then we'll make the repairs. And obviously, as we put a dollar amount to those things, that'll be part of our budgeting process for 2020.
And Chief, with that smaller and with the smaller and larger boats, I'm sure you all share that with the other entities, well, the other jurisdictions around Charleston, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
If anybody needs the resources that we've got, we will share those. And it's important to note that we don't have the only fire boats in the area. So Charleston, the city of Charleston has some, North Charleston, Mount Pleasant, the St. John's Fire Departments over on Johns Island. We all have marine capabilities, and in the marine world, but just in the world of fire protection in the city, we all share resources, and we share them, we construct them in such a way that you don't have to ask permission to use the resource. If there's already a built agreement that says, when you have an emergency, time is of the essence. So when that emergency arises, we will just send the closest unit that can solve the problem, regardless of whose name is on the side.
Wow. And have when you're thinking about reconstructing, for lack of a better word, Chief, this small boat that you have, do you by chance get any other recommendations from other jurisdictions like the North Charleston Fire Department or the Mount Pleasant Fire Department?
We all operate pretty closely. We were all just meeting earlier today, as a matter of fact. So those things come up in the course of conversation, and some of it is, what do we need to have as far as our own capability with the city of Charleston? But then we're comparing our capability and our needs against what the other jurisdictions already have or what they're planning, so that we don't spend our money where we don't need to spend our money.
Sure.
Yeah.
And speaking of the money, Chief, let me ask you. Uh, I know that now that you have basically all of your resources and you have personnel. So how does that affect your budget as far as the budget turned out?
As far as what?
Yeah, how does that affect your budget?
Having the resources that we've got.
Yes, sir, and the
So,
personnel now.
yeah. So it's in a couple of different ways. We know that more than 90% of our allocated budget is going to go to personnel, pay, and benefits. So there's a big chunk of that. 5 years ago, when we had so many vacancies, in addition to paying salary and benefits, we also had an incredible amount of overtime that we were paying just to maintain minimum staffing on fire apparatus. As you get to full staffing, or you're staying close to full staffing, you're still paying salary and benefits, but you're paying more salary and benefits because of the people you've got.
Right.
You're also paying less in overtime. So it all tends to even out. But I think a critical thing to note is that when your staffing levels are up, you're not forcing people to work. People are already scheduled to come in to staff the fire apparatus. We typically have a couple of resource needs any given day, and we hire some firefighters back on overtime. But when your vacancy rate is low, those firefighters can choose to come back to work versus us mandating they come back to work. So that's a pretty important note for the last couple of years.
Wow. So how many of those firefighters have actually taken you all up on that offer?
Well, this depends on the day and who is on vacation and who is out sick and who's been injured and can't come to work. And then that dictates the number and types of personnel slots that we've got to fill in the course of a day. I'd say right now, if I'm just averaging out, we probably have 6 to 10 firefighters that we hire back in the course of a 24-hour period.
Wow. So they're like basically temporary workers, you would say?
Well, they're full-time employees
Okay.
with the Charleston Fire Department, but if we have a staffing shortage, we will send a message to the department, and basically it says, if you have these types of certifications, this is what we need for an assignment tomorrow. And if you have those and you're willing to work, let us know.
Oh, that's really reason. That really is amazing. So, Chief, you like I said earlier, you have the personnel, you have the resources. So, what are your needs right now for your fire department?
Well, I think there's obvious coverage gaps that we have emerging in the city. There are not places where we are not performing adequately, but part of our job is to identify, prevent, and solve problems. So again, when you look at how Charleston is populating and how it's building, then you look around you and you say, when you have more people per square mile and when your buildings are starting to go up versus going out,
Right.
creates challenges for the fire department. So working with city leadership just to make sure that they're aware of those challenges.
Right.
But if we pivot away from the emergency response, the real needs in the fire department are just this shift in mindset and the resources to shift the mindset to say, our job really is to put ourselves out of business. If we could not have a fire in the course of a calendar year, what a fantastic thing that would
Yes.
be. When somebody has a fire, we're trained to handle it. We excel at handling it, but it also means that somebody is losing something. For us to do our job, somebody is losing something. So we should be trying to put ourselves out of business To do that, we have to get out into the community when there's no emergency, and we have to start training the community to solve their own problems. That's what the biggest need is in the fire department, is just the ability to push out into the community and make sure that they know what they need to know to keep themselves safe.
So let me ask you this then, Chief. What type of training classes are you offering residents here in the city of Charleston?
Well, the two that are the most popular for us are hands-only CPR and what we call stop the bleed. And they're both medical classes that we offer. We also offer classes on how to properly use fire extinguishers and basic fire safety and that type of thing. But the two that are most often requested are hands-only CPR and stop the bleed. An interesting fact is that when somebody is in need of CPR, for every minute they go without receiving CPR, they have a 10% less chance of a positive outcome. So we really need for the community to get behind the concept of early CPR saves lives. We are available and willing to provide that training free of charge, which is a great thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chief, obviously you want to help the community, with those situations that God forbid, comes up. So when you're out in the community, what else are you hearing from the community that they want from you all?
I think when we get feedback from the community, really it is such positive feedback. One of the great things about being in the fire service is that everybody loves a firefighter. And it's a great spot to be in. So typically the feedback that we get is that the department is doing a great job and that we just need to keep doing a great job. Now, I would say the absence of negative feedback isn't a reason for us to stop and say we've accomplished everything that we need to accomplish. If anything, it should tell us that we have a tremendous amount of trust with the public and we should capitalize on that trust. So we should keep pushing forward. If people already trust us, that's half the battle. We can then push a safety message that hopefully people will embrace, and we can go about creating that vision of a safer Charleston.
And Chief, what is that safety message that people are really not hearing that you want to get out?
A lot of times it's just, it's basic fire safety. And we already talked a little bit about the medical training and that type of thing. But really the safety message comes down to simple stuff. And if I start to articulate those things, people may think, well, gosh, that's common sense. It's not common for everybody to know that you want to turn the handles of your pots so that they can't get knocked off the stove and have a hot liquid splash on somebody. What if it's a child who reaches up? You don't want to have loose-fitting clothes and then reach onto the stove where your sleeve will catch on fire. If God forbid that sleeve does catch on fire, you don't want to wave it around. You want to stop, drop, and roll. And although those things seem very, very common sense, when you're in the stress of a situation, sometimes you simply don't think about those things. So we have to keep reiterating the same message over and over and over. And then, it's undeniable that we have a segment of the population that have English as a second language.
Right.
So how do we bridge that gap to make sure that people who are not speaking English, maybe in the home, are still getting the safety message that we need them to get?
What are those other gaps that you want to close with the Charleston community and your fire department?
Well, one of the biggest ones that we have identified and that we are working on is to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in the department. When you look at the city of Charleston's demographics, and specifically the fire department's demographics, what we find is that most of our workforce in the fire department are white males. They do a fantastic job. But when our fire apparatus are going down the road, one of the byproducts of not adequately reflecting the community that we serve is that young kids look up at a fire truck, and a fire truck is such an awesome thing to see. And when you see it, those young kids deserve the opportunity to see somebody that looks like them looking back at them. And if we can do that, it builds trust. And it also, in an unspoken way, it signifies that that is a career opportunity that is available to that young kid at some point in his or her life. Right now, we have a tremendous workforce in the city of Charleston Fire Department. We just need to really focus on reflecting the community that we serve.
And when you look at that population, Chief, how many African American firefighters do you want to hire? How many, Latino firefighters do you want to hire in the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Over time, if I could project out 5 to 10 years, I would say we should have the demographics of the fire department such that it reflects the Charleston community. So whatever number that is, that's what we should be striving for. And it's going to take us a while. We are typically hiring maybe 35 to 40 people per year to put on fire trucks. So really we're talking about looking at the long game here and making sure that we train the highest quality firefighters in the country. And I think we do that in Charleston. And making sure that as we have our hiring processes in place, and then as we go through recruit school, that everything comes together to make sure that the applicant pool is a diverse applicant pool, which then enables us to hire a diverse applicant pool. So over time, we will fix this.
And I hate to be redundant, Chief, but what particular resources do you have to recruit the Asian, Latino, and Black firefighters right now?
Well, we have a recruitment team in the department, and they focus primarily on local talent. They go to the different high schools. They go to Burke High School. They go to St. John's High School. We have them going to high schools around the state that have high school firefighting programs in place. And then we are currently engaging with a vendor that will come in and look at everything the Charleston Fire Department does related to hiring and promoting and training our personnel to point us in the direction of best practices so we can diversify the organization. So that is one thing that we currently are doing.
And what best practices are ideal for your department right now?
Well, I think that focusing on local talent and focusing on diverse local talent is one of the best things that we can do. But again, we're bringing a vendor in who will look at everything we do and make sure that the effort that we expend to address this issue is in the right areas.
And Chief, let me ask you this, and I want to get back to what you just said in a second, but what are those measurable goals and objectives that you have set thus far for your department?
What are the measurable goals and objectives that we set?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Well, there are the obvious ones. We want to make sure that from the time somebody dials 911 and that call gets picked up to the time we are actively working to solve that person's problem, we want that to be no more than 7 minutes and 30 seconds for the different emergencies that arise. So that is a very basic one. Other things, we want to make sure that in the course of a year, that 25% of the Charleston population has some type of non-emergency positive contact with the fire department so that we can push that safety message that we already talked about. Now, whether that is through a community event where we are physically there or that's through our social media efforts, it doesn't really matter how we are interacting as long as we're getting the message out. So those are the types of things that we are measuring. And other things are to make sure that our infrastructure is such that the firefighters that are working have good facilities in which to live for 24 hours when they come to work.
Where are we right now with that as the city grows? Where do you need the next fire station?
So the next fire station is going to be on Johns Island. It's going to be at the corner of Maybank Highway and Wilkes Battery, and we should break ground on that in the next couple of months. I'm hoping that sometime in May we'll probably have a groundbreaking on that. And once we break the ground, it's going to be about an 18-month construction period.
Not bad.
Really, what we're going to do over the next several years is we know that we have a couple of firehouses and resources that we need on Johns Island. We know that Cane Boy is growing at a tremendous rate, so we've got to put more resources out there. So we'll jump back and forth across the city, putting infrastructure in place and then putting the firefighters in the firehouses to provide the protection.
Yeah, and I'm sitting right down the street from one of them, one of your firehouses right now off of Cummings Street. Love that firehouse, and the one right there on Cannon Street where I used to live. So that that's childhood memories there. But let me ask you this: what resources can you use right now for Cane Boy until you get that actual firehouse over there?
So we have two firehouses on Cane Boy already. So with those two firehouses, we've got 10 firefighters in Cane Boy every single day. So when there are smaller scale emergencies, maybe a vehicle is on fire, it's easily handled with one fire group. So we've got those things. The concern comes with those larger scale incidents, a house fire maybe, where we need more resources. Luckily, we already talked about the fact that we've got these automatic aid agreements in place with the other fire departments. So we use the firefighters that we've got in place, and we will augment them with City of Charleston firefighters from Daniel Island, and then we will also augment them in Cane Boy with North Charleston Fire Department personnel and Mount Pleasant Fire Department personnel. So that's the way the system is designed to work. If we place City of Charleston firefighters in Cane Boy long term, we're looking at probably another 12 or 14 firefighters out there any given day. What it does is it lessens the strain on the other fire departments to assist, but then also it reduces the response times. With fire service, service delivery, time really is of the essence. So you want to make sure you have the appropriate number of resources responding, and you want to make sure that you get them there quickly, because fire grows at an incredibly rapid rate. So that's the reason to plan to put those resources in place.
Now, Chief, how many fire calls have you gotten this year versus non-fire calls?
Well, I haven't looked at the numbers for year to date, but I can tell you for last year, we were at about 22,700 calls for service. That's combined fire calls and medical calls, and then just service calls. So really, the ratio as it breaks down is about 60% fire calls, 40% medical calls. And within those fire calls, not everything is a major emergency. That's a fire call that is maybe everything from a house that's on fire to a bit of grass on the side of the road.
Oh, yes. And I hate to keep going back to growth. But as you see the city, and we all see the city grow, Chief, what are those other problems or service calls do you see trending that you and your team are actually preparing for right now?
So with more growth, you typically have a greater population density. So and it starts to stress the infrastructure, maybe the road system. So you start to see more vehicle accidents. And then as you put more people in an area, you start to see things that you would associate with people being in a small space. Obviously, your medical calls go up. There are heart attacks. There are more lacerations. There are more issues with people not being able to breathe. If houses are closer together, when you have a small fire that's growing into a larger fire in a house, if the other houses are close to each other because of population density, then the fire has the potential to go from one building to another building fairly quickly. So we have to plan for that. As the city grows and commercial development is added, then you have suppression systems built into the commercial structures. And sometimes those suppression systems activate and they trigger false alarms. So our false alarm rate goes up, but we want to make sure that if there's a chance to have fire protection responding versus not responding, we obviously always want to make sure that we respond. But we plan for all that constantly. I mean, there's a meeting tomorrow, as a matter of fact, talk about traffic congestion and how traffic congestion could impede emergency response and what we do about it.
And Chief, one last question for you. How many suppression systems are there here in the city of Charleston?
I am not even sure, to be honest with you, but typically a commercial structure is going to have some kind of a suppression or a monitoring system in it, so that either if there's smoke detected in the building, that's going to get noticed very quickly by the suppression or by the monitoring system, and we're going to be dispatched. Or it could be a building that has an automatic sprinkler system in it. So if a fire starts, the sprinkler system catches the fire when it's still relatively small. So we're not dealing with fire and smoke and trapped people. What we're dealing with when we get there is water. We have to make sure the fire's out and turn the water off. It's a much better problem to have.
Absolutely. And one last question, Chief. What are the annual fire losses for the city of Charleston?
I believe last year our fire loss for the entire year was at $4 million. And I can't remember the total amount of property, the property value that we protect, but in comparison to what was lost in the course of the year, 20, 30 times that amount is what was saved in the city of Charleston. So if you look at it that way, the fire department earns its money.
Yes, they do. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the City of Charleston Fire Chief Dan Curia, thank you for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Have a great day. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.